Welcome to the chapter 15 of the discussion, which is on managing conflict and negotiation. In this chapter, we are going to cover conflicts in organization, a contemporary perspective on intergroup conflict. We will know what causes intergroup conflict, the causes of dysfunctional intergroup conflict, how to manage intergroup conflict through resolution, stimulating constructive intergroup conflict, negotiations, negotiation tactics, increasing negotiation effectiveness. This whole discussion will be spread through 2 lecture sessions. In the first session, we will try to know about the conflicts, the contemporary perspectives till to some extent of the causes of dysfunctional conflict and some portion of like constructive intergroup conflicts to that, and in the next we will continue more with the negotiation tactics and increasing negotiation effectiveness. So, to start off with, we will like to first discuss like what is meant by conflicts in organization. As we know, like a conflict means a situation if where at least there are, when we are talking of conflicts in organizations, and mainly where we are dealing with not intrapersonal conflicts, but interpersonal or intergroup conflicts, then the first situation is there has to be like more than one person or more than one groups. When you are talking of intrapersonal conflict, means that conflicts that is going on within an individual, but in organizational situations we will focus more on intrapersonal. And when you are talking of intrapersonal conflicts, it is conflicts that is going on within the individual. But when we are in an organizational situation, we will focus more on interpersonal and intergroup conflicts or intragroup conflict also in some cases, and less on like intrapersonal conflicts. So, when we are talking of interpersonal conflict and intragroup and intergroup conflict, it is evident like there is a presence of more than one person or more than one party. And when we are talking of conflict, means there is a dynamic of relationship between these two parties, regarding like one party is perceiving the other party as one whose presence one party feels like the presence of the other party is negatively affecting some of their own concerns, and this negative effect is something that the first party is cares about. So, we can tell like the conflict begins, it is a process that begins when one party perceives that the other party has negatively affected or is about to negatively affect something that the first party is caring about. So, if something is very precious to the to a person, and I want to achieve that goal or something, and I feel that the presence of another person or another party or another group, whatever it is going to provide a barrier to that, then that is the and is negatively affecting the goal or the thing that is what I like, is blocking my approach to that goal or to that object, then we feel like there is a conflict. And it encompasses a wide range of conflict that people experience in organizations, and these may arise mainly due to many factors, as we told, like it is due to the incompatibility of the goals, like person A has a goal and person B has a goal, a different goal, and these two goals are not matching with each other. So, incompatibility of the goals, then differences in interpretation of facts. So, same fact is interpreted in two different ways by two different persons, and both think like their interpretation is correct. So, that is differences in interpretation of facts, and disagreements are also there regarding what to expect. So, what behaviors are to be expected from the other person. So, these three may lead to conflicts. These are the conflicts generally that people face within an organization regarding expectations of behavior, regarding interpretation of facts, and of course, like incompatibility of the goals perceived. And when I feel that the other person is acting as a block to these factors, or we cannot arrive at a match, we cannot agree with each other, and so that is where the conflict lies. So, perception is again a very important factor. Until and unless I perceive that the other person is, or the other party is a hindrance to some of the things that I want to do in the organization, then maybe conflict is not there. So, we'll try to focus into the transition of the thoughts which has taken place in the conflict itself, like how conflict was earlier viewed and what is the present view when you are talking of conflict. So, traditional view of conflict, if you see, it's a view that the conflict is generally harmful in nature and should be avoided. So, it's a view towards the dysfunctional view of conflict, which treats that like the conflict arises from poor communication and lack of openness and failure to respond in a certain way. So, it's a traditional view, and it suggests like this is a thing which should be avoided by organization, and we should try to prevent from conflicts from happening. Next is like a human relations view of conflict, which states like whenever which is the belief that conflict and is very natural and is an inevitable outcome in any group, because it stresses on the level of individual differences present between the members of a group and within a group or between a group, and because there are so many members with individual differences, it's inevitable that the conflict arises from the difference in interest level, difference in attitudes, values, etc. So, and personality pattern. So, human relations view of conflict, it moves to the belief that conflict is very natural and inevitable outcome in any group. So, and the interaction, the view of conflict is that it considers like the conflict is to be a very positive force in a group, and something which is very opposite to the traditional view. It also takes like conflict should be encouraged sometimes in organization, and it is entirely necessary, absolutely necessary for group formation and help the group to perform effectively, because until and unless there is no conflict and people do not get to view different ways of seeing things, or different goals to be reached and different ways to behave, then we cannot make a selection between the more appropriate way of doing things, or we cannot mix and match between the goals to be reached and the ways of reaching that goal, and effectiveness in that way may deteriorate if there is only a homogeneity of thought process in the group and there is no heterogeneity in the way that a particular way is a particular thing is viewed and ways suggested, like how certain things could be done. So, from an interactional point of view, for the group to perform more effectively, it's necessary, like conflicts are sometimes encouraged in the organization, and it acts as a positive force in the group. So, we will look into some of the contemporary perspectives on intergroup conflict, and will start with the fact which is called like functional conflict. So, this is again a shift from the traditional way of looking into conflict, which takes like the conflict is a very harmful situation, and it gives a negative connotation to the term conflict itself. But the conflict, the word conflict per se is not negative in nature. It's about a force where it's a force acting between two people, when one is perceiving that the other person is having a different goal, and different ways of doing things, and different ways of interacting. So, what we can divide actually, like and there is a disagreement between these two parties regarding these aspects. So, what we can divide is the word conflict into two major subdivisions. One is like that of functional conflict, and the other is dysfunctional conflict. So, when you are talking of functional conflict, so this conflict, it enhances or benefits organizational performance. So, it occurs when the groups disagree on the best means to achieve a goal, not on the goal itself. Typically results in selection of better means or alternative. So, the groups do not differ in the goal, but they differ in how to reach that goal. And when you get different views of or different ways of reaching a particular goal, we can select about amongst the alternatives and arrive at the best alternative. So, some of the positive contributions of functional conflict are: it plays an essential role in preventing group or organizational stagnation and resistance to change. So, when there is a positive conflict and functional conflict, so people know like things are about to change, and it may not be the fact, like always things are accepted in the way that we think it is the best. There could be other better viewpoints also, and we have to learn to assimilate and accommodate to these facts. So, it is so it somewhat prevents stagnation and move, and it generates new ways of doing things. So, it plays a role in preventing resistance to change. So, it creates an increased awareness of the problems that requires to be addressed. So, sometimes what happens, like until and unless there is a conflict, until and unless somebody voices out like things are done in a wrong way or things need to be done in a different way, we generally don't get to know about the problems that need to be addressed. So, positive and this functional conflict may lead to increased awareness about the problems that need to be addressed in the organization. So, because again because there are different actors who are present in this situation, who have their own viewpoints regarding the particular problem at hand and how it can be solved, then it can result in a broader and more productive searches for better solutions. So, when there is a homogeneity of idea, then all will arrive. Even if there are 10 people, what we get is one solution. But if there is a conflict and functional conflict is originates is there, and we encourage people to arrive at different solutions, then from 10 people maybe we get 10 different solutions, and then we have to choose like which is or which are the better solutions, and so our store of the solutions increases. So, again, a conflict, it facilitates change, adaptation and innovation. So, because my own ways of looking at things get changes, it is shaken by the ideas of others present around. So, it sometimes stimulates, encourages your innovation, like to think differently about some of the things. So, these are like some of the points where functional conflict is essential, and how and why it should be encouraged by organizations. What we generally discuss and what we are more concerned about, like what flashes in our mind immediately when we hear the word conflict, is this part of what we call dysfunctional conflict. So, any conflict that hinders the achievement of an organizational goal is called dysfunctional conflict. Management must seek to eliminate such conflict. Functional intergroup conflict can sometimes turn to dysfunctional conflicts when we move away from the task at hand maybe, and we focus towards the person and try to find fault with the person, and maybe deal with situations which are not related to the immediate context and conflict, but we try to refer to situations which are much back in memory and happened at as other point of time in a different context, and we try to draw reference from those and bring conflict at a very personal level and do not keep it at the task level. Then what happens? The functional conflict may turn into dysfunctional conflict. We will try to find out some of the consequences of dysfunctional intergroup conflict. So, some of the functions like consequences are like certain changes are brought. So, when you are talking of intergroup conflict, means like this conflict is between two groups. So, the changes will happen of course within the group and between the group. So, first we will look into the changes which occurs within the group. So, when there is a strong intergroup dysfunctional conflict, then the first change within the group is of course increased group cohesiveness. So, what does the group do is puts aside the differences maybe that was there amongst the members and tries to maintain the solidarity within the group, so that as a unit they can stand or against the attacks or threats given by the other group. So, that is intergroup conflicts leads to first increased group cohesiveness when you are talking of changes within the groups. Second is emphasis on loyalty. Group norms for conformity becomes more strong because we want to see like all the members are aligned to the purpose of the group. So, and here the group norms, group goals becomes more important than the individual member satisfaction. Next is rise of autocratic leadership. So, this comes into demand for like sometimes there is a demand for increased group direction, because in terms of in times when there is like intergroup conflict, and people do not know how to face it, how to answer to those challenges. What the group members may like more is a sort of direction from the group leader, and there is a desire for strong leadership at this point of time. So what becomes more important is autocratic leadership rather than your benevolent or participative leadership. So the members at this time want to be directed, and they desire a strong leader who can show them their way. So, and the focus is on activity in the sense, so the groups try to do what they do well, and they become more task oriented in nature. Changes between the groups, this is another important thing. One, the first change is of course like it's a distorted perception where every group, like each group, it views itself as a better performer than the opposing group, and as more important to the organization. So this is the distorted perception. So what happens, these may happen due to the error of overestimation or overestimating oneself and underestimating the competencies of the other group. So what happens, we go by this distorted perception. Negative stereotyping, then in this situation all the negative stereotypes that have been formed about the other opposing group are reinforced during this time. So what is done is intra-group differences reduces, and the inter-group differences increases. So it's more, so this arises from the, again, due to formation of group cohesion. What happens, we tend to perceive the differences within the group as lesser as combined to differences between the groups. Decreased communication, where like communication between the groups usually break by this time, because the groups do not wish to share their secrets with each other. So the communication between the groups get usually broken during this time. And the types of conflict that are faced in the organization could be classified under three broad headings, like task conflict, relationship conflict, and process conflict. So when you're talking of functional conflict, so functional conflict is more on the task conflict and process conflict, which is a rational way of looking at the conflicts. And when you're talking of task conflict, it is a conflict over contents and goals of the work. When you're talking of the process conflict, it is process over which there is a conflict, and the conflict is regarding how the work gets done. So, but when you're talking of a dysfunctional conflict, it is more relationship oriented, and it is based on interpersonal relationships, and this may sometimes make a functional conflict into dysfunctional conflict, because due to our personal likes or dislikes with each other, of the persons involved in conflict, what starts is a situation of blaming each other for a particular situation, and the main issue of the conflict goes out of hand. So, the presence of relational conflict, of too much of the presence of relational conflict may turn a functional conflict into a dysfunctional conflict. The causes of intergroup conflict are is quite elaborate. We will try to focus on some of the causes over here. So, first of the situations where or the cause is, the first cause is of course interdependence, and that is where the conflict arises. Now, interdependence may be of like various nature, and broadly it is classified under three headings, which is called pool interdependence, sequential interdependence, and like reciprocal interdependence. In pooled interdependence, though there is no direct interaction between the members from two different groups, but interdependence exists because their pooled performance determines organizational performance. So, it creates relatively low conflict potential. So, as the members are not interacting with each other, so there is lack of much lack of personal interdependence, but the interdependence lies only because together they lead to certain objectives of the organization. So, these type of interdependence, because we are together and we are contributing to the greater purpose of the organization. So, sometimes there is a chances of conflict, but the chances are relatively low as compared to other types of factors which leads to intergroup conflict. Second type of interdependence is called sequential interdependence. So, in sequential interdependence, what happens is the interdependence is in sequence. So, what happens is when in sequential conflict, it is required that the one group must complete its task before another group can complete a particular task. So, it is all there in that chain. So, a group 1 has to complete, then only can group 2 start. So, just like in assembly line. So, if the performance of group A is coming down due to some of the reasons, and group 2 has to wait because of these things not coming from group 1 on which they can start working, then that situation may lead to a conflict which is called sequential interdependence, and the conflict may come up due to that. And again, this is required like in situations, sequential interdependence is required in situations where like the like in assembly line where the end product of one is the beginning of the other function. So, and when there is a delay in providing like end product, which will be the start product to start off the function, how to do it in a for the next function, then this type of conflicts may arise. So and this is very inevitable when this sequential interdependence is there, and only responsible and responsible and performance, in the sense like we should try to finish things in time, proper time management and quality management. So so that taking into views like our end product or somebody start raw material. So our rather we should take it to be raw materials, like our end products is raw material for our next function. If we understand that and try to finish things in time and deliver it to the next part of the thing, next people who are waiting, maybe there is no conflict to it. But when we do not understand that, and then we delay, make unnecessarily delay, or the finished good is not of good quality, then these conflicts become very inevitable. The sequential conflict due to sequential interdependence. Reciprocal interdependence is where the output of one group is the input for the other group, and input for the and output for that other group is again an input for this group. So if this process goes on from morning till the particular goal is reached in maybe in a factory or in other situations. So there is a high chances of conflict over here, because if there is no coordination, between the two people involved in this reciprocal interdependence, then what happens? I will not care for the factor like the quality and when I deliver it, because that is, I do not care for it, like it is a raw material for the other person, and that simultaneously vice versa, the other person also has to think like, if I deliver only at considerable good time and in good quality, then it will act again as a raw material for the other person or the group. So reciprocal interdependence is very much important. So importance in the, as a potential source of conflict, and these are present in organizations which are more complex in nature. So what we find, like it's all organizations have pooled interdependence, because by virtue of being a member of a particular organization and related to the organizational goal, so pooled interdependence is there. We cannot deny it. Like, so all organizations have pooled interdependence, but when it's a complex organization, then it has a sequential interdependence, and further higher up in the degree of complexity or the precision of the work needed, then maybe there is the reciprocal interdependence. And what we get to know is, the more complex the organization, the greater the conflict potential. And so here is where a balance is again required between, like, and when you are in a reciprocal relationship, interdependence, or when you are talking of sequential interdependence, what is required, like for these to respect these nature of jobs which are making sequential interdependence or reciprocal interdependence inevitable, that the actors within the two groups, the performance or rather the group members of who are a part to this, who are like the related in this whole process, should be very responsible and person, and understanding the gravity of the situation, the importance of the sequential interdependence or reciprocal interdependence for the benefit of the organization and for them per se also, and perform in such a way like this. The nature of interdependence itself doesn't give rise to any conflict which may turn into dysfunctional conflict. Next is goal differences. So, we talked about interdependence, one of the factors which leads to intergroup conflict. So, first we have discussed about interdependence. Next we talk of like goal difference. So, in goal difference, what happens, like it occurs when two different goals have to be reached by the two groups, and they cause conflict when the groups interact. So, why? Because as the groups have two different goals, there could be different sets of expectations, and what is to be done and how it is to be done, and that may cause conflict when the group interact. So, goal differences become more evident when resources are limited in nature and are allocated to all the groups. Then next is conflict pressures increases when groups think resources have not been allocated equitably. So, how to make decisions, how to choose particular alternatives. So, these are things which needs to be shared, things which needs to be discussed, and we get to know, like maybe arrive at something which is more equitable in nature. So, conflict pressures arise when these resources have not been allocated properly, and these resources could be anything, any of the resources. We are like here, we are not restricted only to the maybe material resources or monetary resources, and your person also, any sort of resources that is required to do a particular carry forward a particular work, if it is not equitably distributed, so then it may rise to a problem. Even like when you are talking of like people making decisions, and they are not given the enough information also to take those decisions, then those are also like resources in one sense. So and people think like these resources are some of the groups are enjoying more and some of the groups are enjoying less, then it may lead to conflict. So different goals and can produce different perceptions, and also different time per horizons can provide different produce different time perspectives, and reduce or increase the importance of a particular problem. So and these perspectives vary from person to person, from within for different age groups or persons in different hierarchies. So whatever it is, so these how the importance of a problem is perceived and what do we do to solve it, these could be different from person to person based on their own backgrounds and the situations they are in and what they have to do, and that's why these goal differences may lead to conflict. Perceptual differences are status incongruency, where one group perceives like they are more important and prestigious in the organization, and these perception like I am better than you are leads to develop some stereotypes within the organization, which can lead to intergroup conflict and erode interpersonal relation or intergroup relations. So we should be very careful about like what we are perceiving about ourselves and what we are perceiving about others, and how much realistic orientation is there in this perception of how much realistic orientation is there, the perception of like what we perceive what we are and what we perceive like what we are and what we actually are. So if this is not there, then what happens is sometimes we form certain stereotypes about the other groups and more or less which is negative in nature, and when this is done, then it may lead to conflicts in the organization, which is more within the domain of like relationship conflict, and it may affect like the intergroup relations and their performance. So when the conflict is low in the organization, we go for a rational model in the organization. Rational model is a model which describes the organization as a traditional model, and it's like as hierarchically arranged. There is a proper organizational structure, there is a proper information flow in a linear path, and all these things are called like having a rational model for the organization. So, but when there is a conflict is high, the political model describes the organization. The political model is, it's a very like fluid like structure where there is like people interact with each other not based on their organizational structure in certain times, but there are in more cases like cross group or cross departmental communication, different impression management techniques to be near the power source. All these factors are there, and it describes the political model, and it is more present in situations where conflicts are high, so that we can form groups, subgroups and cliques and all these things, so that we can preserve our interest level, our ways of looking at things, and we can as a try to form our own networks and answer to the problems, to the conflicts which may appear as threatening to us, and answer to it in a proper way. When we are talking of stages of conflict, there are 4 different stages of conflict. Here we will cover till 3 of the stages of conflict. The first stage is potential opposition or incompatibility. So, potential opposition or incompatibility, it arises from the first factor, of course, is from semantic difficulties, misunderstandings, all these causes noise in communication. Next is like the structure. So, it depends on like the size and specialization of jobs, then whether there is a clarity of the purpose, jurisdictional clarity, ambiguity, whether there is a member and goal incompatibility or not, and what are the leadership styles, whether it is participative in nature or close in nature, what are the reward system, whether it is a win-loss style or not, and whether there is a dependence or interdependence between the groups. So, all these factors will determine the structure, and next in this is the personal variables, like different individual value systems, personality types. All these factors may create a potential opposition or incompatibility. So, this is still we do not get to recognize these as conflicts, but these are potential sources of conflict. Now, then what changes this potential stage into the actual conflict stage? Stage 2 is cognition and personalization. In that, what we get at 2 stages, one is the perceived conflict and the other is the felt conflict. In perceived conflict, so at least a feeling should be there on one of the parties of like the presence of the other party is presence, this awareness, like the presence of the other party is not very comfortable, and or we disagree with how the other person is seeing or the other party is seeing things. This awareness on the part of the group is required for like transforming the potential into the actual conflict situation. B is failed conflict, where there is an emotional attachment, so escalation which includes emotional involvement, creating anxiety, tenseness, frustration or hostility. A point to be noted here is that like until both the parties perceive and feel the conflict is, then conflict is maybe not there, because if we do not recognize like the presence of the other individual or the party is somewhat disturbing, and or challenging, however we put it, and it creates certain emotional anxiety, tense within the perceiver in both the cases. So it's not a conflict, because and then the potential situation will remain as a potential situation. So the perceived and felt part of the conflict must be there, so for turning a potential situation into a realized actual conflict. So next is intentions. So after we realize this conflict, so there could be intentions of how to deal with this conflict, and it can be based on like cooperativeness or assertiveness. So this is again in two dimensions, like whether we try to answer and satisfy the other party's concerns or satisfy own concerns. So when you're talking of cooperativeness, it's satisfying other person's concerns. When you're talking of assertiveness, it is satisfying one's own concerns. And there could be 5 different ways of conflict handling intentions. And these intentions are competing, collaborating, avoiding, accommodating, and compromising. So in competing, there is a desire to satisfy one's own needs and interest regardless of the impact on the other party to the conflict. In collaborating, where the parties, both the parties try to satisfy fully the concerns of all the parties involved. In avoiding, so it's a desire to withdraw or from or suppress a conflict. Accommodating is the willingness of one party in a conflict to place the opponent's interest above his or her own interest, to accommodate the other party's perceptions and interest into our own. Compromising is where each party is willing to give up something, some of the personal interest, desires, etc., in order to achieve the bigger goal for the organization. Now, these are the 5 dimensions of conflict handling intentions, and it is used in different situations. So, use of competition is recommended when quick, decisive action is vital and on important issues, where unpopular actions need implementing, like cost cutting, etc., on issues vital to the organization's welfare, when one knows what is right, and against people who take advantage of non-competitive behavior. So these are the situations where use of competition is recommended as a conflict handling intentions. Use of collaboration is recommended when there is a need to find an integrated solution, when both the sets of concerns are too important to be compromised, and objective is to learn and then to merge insights from people with different perspectives, to get commitments by incorporating concerns from others into a consensus, like agreed upon situation, and to work through the feelings that have interfered in a particular relationship. So first we take care of what went wrong, and we try to correct it and find out a better way of interacting, and then that will then we arrive at something which is common, that can be followed, a consensus that can be followed, and we work with that. So for what we try to clear first are the situations which brings in these blocks. So and we try to and address issues related to it, and then maybe collaboration is the better approach. Use of avoidance is recommended when the issue is trivial at hand and more important issues are waiting for decision making. When one sees like there is no way of satisfying his or her needs, then when like the situation for the time being is disruption, this potential disruption is overweighing the benefits from the conflict resolution techniques. So, and it to provide a space and time to the people to cool down and regain the perspective. So, where some decisions need to be taken based on information collected at different parts of time and points of time, and so we cannot arrive at an immediate decision on solution. And when we find like the presence of others can resolve the conflict effectively, and when issues are symptomatic for other issues. So, if we try to give more importance to this particular issue now, it may give rise to similar other issues in future. So, it is better to avoid discussions about these issues now, and what you tell like avoidance is a better technique in this type of situations. Use of accommodation is recommended when one finds that one is wrong and it's allowed to a better position to be heard, and when we have to act in a much reasonable way, and when we find like issues are more important to others than it is to us, and we have to maintain cooperation with that, and when harmony and stability are very important. So, and we want employees to learn from mistakes, so accommodation is recommended. Compromise is recommended when goals are important, but it's not worth the effort of potential disruption of more assertive approaches. So, we want again when there is a temporary settlements required to complex issues, and we want to arrive at a solution under time pressure, and when we have tried for collaboration and competition and when it has been unsuccessful. So, what we do is we try to compromise where both the parties give away some of their own personal interest to arrive at a common point. So, we will end over here and we will move on with the discussion, which is in the next lecture we will carry forward with the main thing, which is manifest conflict, like how it is manifested and how we can move for like negotiations and other techniques in conflict handling. Thank you.